Welcome back. You're still tuned into News and Views with myself, Salailo Makudiro. We turn our attention now to mounting concerns over governance and financial stability in Johannesburg, Africa's richest city. This is after Moody's Investor Service. Well, remember Moody's, right? South Africa's favorite, shall I say, favorite rating agency. They are your favorite, right? Well, they've essentially placed the city of Johannesburg on review for a possible credit downgrade. The warning points to persistent governance failures, rising debt pressure, and ongoing service delivery breakdowns, all of which us, the citizens of this great world-class African city, know all too well, and all of which could ultimately push borrowing costs higher and further strain an already fragile metro, especially now as South Africa's economic engine seems to be faltering. The implications are stretching far beyond the city itself, and we're going to be unpacking all of that. We'll be chatting to Alex van den Heever, professor at the Wits School of Governance, to help us unpack what this ultimately means for you and I as residents of the city. What does it mean for Johannesburg as a whole, and the implications, most importantly, that will come with the broader fiscal health of local government. I think that's one thing to also just try and unpack and trying to understand. And we're going to be chatting to the prof. He's joining us via a virtual platform. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to News and Views. I really appreciate you giving us your time this morning.
Good morning.
And I think we'll jump right into it. Just how serious is this moment for the city of Johannesburg? What does being placed on a downgrade watch actually signal to markets and investors?
Well, what it means is, so in many cases, public institutions or authorities or governments borrow, essentially lend to institutional investors who very often include pension funds, etc. So these investors will then invest only in investment-grade investments because the policies of those pension funds and organizations who have essentially allocated their funds for investment place restrictions on what you can invest in. So essentially, you have to invest in quality loans because there's a possibility, or other kinds of investments or equities, etc., high quality investments, that if they fail, they don't want to basically be at risk of losing those investments. So essentially, they remove through their rules the ability of investment funds to invest in anything that is below investment grade. So that what that means is that South Africa could lose access to, Johannesburg would lose access to institutional investors. That's what a Moody's downgrade generates, because once they do that, then essentially a lot of these funds are obligated to remove those bonds from their books, and that will cause a problem. So yes, it can cause an increase in the interest rates, but it can also mean that basically nobody takes them up. And it's very difficult to access loans, creating a liquidity problem if Johannesburg is unable to match its expenditure with its revenue, which it appears it's not able to do. And that's part of what Moody's is just a reflection of. It's not that Moody's is doing this to Johannesburg. Johannesburg Metro is doing it to itself. It has appeared to have lost control of its revenue base, which is and also its expenditure side. So on both of those scores, it looks like it's in serious difficulties. If it were a private company, it would be moving toward liquidation at this point. And that's actually the more worrying issue, not Moody's. It's actually Johannesburg, because it's meant to actually finance all of its expenditure from its current revenue, all of it. Loans would really be about liquidity issues and maybe an expansion of investment in particular areas, but essentially it should be financing everything itself. And in terms of the Municipal Finance Management Act, it must kind of budget for a deficit. So national government, if it has a deficit, it will borrow to cover that deficit. Municipalities can borrow, but not necessarily for the same reasons. So what we're seeing is that the Joburg Metro has essentially is essentially failing to collect the revenue it should get, and therefore it is a funding gap is being created between the bulk suppliers. If it's purchasing water from Rand Water or purchasing electricity from Eskom, it's not collecting all the revenue from the people who are using that bulk supply. And there's actually a revenue gap between what they're having to spend and what they're collecting. And that's causing the structural problem within the Joburg Metro.
Very, very important, Prof, to point out. And one thing that really stood out for me, especially as a resident of the city, is the fact that Moody's is pointing directly to governance concerns. And in practical terms, what would you say are some of those failures that have brought the city of Johannesburg to this point? Is it service delivery, which is, the most, overarching factor, or there are other ones that are worthy of mentioning?
So I'd say that there's a serious governance problem in the Joburg Metro overall. So you've got the various public entities that have been set up. So City Power, Pick It Up, Joburg Water, etc., and they are actually performing extremely poorly on the revenue side. Put Pick It Up to the side. Water and electricity are the major utility suppliers, and what appears to be happening is that there is significant corruption in that, as well as in their property portfolios and the rest. So they're not collecting all the revenue they should. The rates and taxes from hijacked buildings, things like that, are not being collected. They're allowing even the buildings they own to steal electricity and water, so they don't get that revenue from them. And then there appears to be a collapse of the effective management of revenue control on the side of Joburg Water and electricity, and particularly in the case of electricity. City Power, I'm sitting with a meter which has shown an error since July 2024. And after numerous complaints and requests and people coming around, it remains. I get an invoice based on an estimate. So since July 2024, for somebody who would be a regular payer, a reliable payer for my electricity, there is no account. There is no way that they can check on how much electricity I'm actually using, because the meter is a dud, and they won't replace it. And it appears that the reason they won't replace it is they don't have money to replace the meters, which means that if they don't have the money to replace these electronic meters that are giving incorrect information centrally, it means that they lose revenue. So, but that's quite aside from the people who are stealing electricity, and therefore nothing is being collected from them, but they are paying for it. So there's corruption in that, in many cases, the bridging that occurs, people are being bribed to allow the bridging to continue. And there and in many cases, these hijacked properties and buildings that are illegally not paying are also, there's no follow-up, no compliance requirement for them. So the inability to actually manage the revenue side is a critical failure, which is tied to corruption, but also the inability to repair systems to maintain them, because it is also tied to corruption, the illegal contractors, etc. We're seeing now that there are cases being brought against City Power for what appear to be improper, irregular contracts that have been set up. So all of this corruption that has impacted on lots of departments, which goes directly to the leadership of the Metro and of the public entities, directly. These are accounting officers. These are people who, in terms of the Municipal Finance Management Act, should go to jail if there is irregular expenditure. Nothing happens to them. So there is a cycle of a lack of accountability all the way through the system, which is being tolerated. And that is generating the failure. So you don't spend the money properly because of the irregular expenditure, corruption, tenders that are incorrect, through the manipulation of the procurement systems. And because you don't really care about anything else, your revenue side starts to fall apart. Now, in the case of national government, they have SARS. And SARS is a more competent revenue collector, and it also has more direct access to people's businesses and individuals to make sure that they pay their taxes regularly. Municipalities have to manage their revenue through their own organizations. And if they're incapable of doing so, then they fail as an organization. So I think it's across the board a governance failure. It goes right to the top. It is very definitely a leadership failure. And the question is, what are their priorities, if not these things? And it appears that their priorities lie elsewhere. They don't lie with actually providing municipal services to people.
Very, very concerning, Prof. I want us to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to talk about whether or not this can be fixed in the short term, or are we looking at a full-blown fiscal crisis here, a structural problem that needs more than just short-term fixes, because I think it's very, very concerning, the picture that you're painting, and we'll touch on it after the short break.
World-class financial services only at Sapphire Global, your financial partner. If you are looking for Islamic, Sharia, and ethical financial products, look no further. Sapphire Global offers a wide range of financial service offerings, from short-term to life and investments. A full-service center with all financial requirements under one brand. Our highly skilled and experienced consultants are ready to help protect your financial future. Contact us on 041 001 0184 or visit our website on www.sapphireglobalfs.com. Sapphire Global is an authorized financial services provider.
Shimmer, sparkle, captivate. Nothing less than a masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness, and every pure diamond becomes more than just a girl's best friend. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, where timeless dreams become a reality. Come to us. We tailor-make designer gold, platinum, and diamond jewelry. Trade in or remodel your old gold. Clad yourself with classy name-branded watches. We offer insurance valuation and freezer card calculation. Visit us at 534 Ridge Road, Overport, or call 031 208 9142. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, manufacturers of fine gold and diamond jewelry.
Across Sudan, starvation is tightening its grip. With rising food prices and widespread malnutrition, 8.7 million people are now facing emergency or famine-level hunger. As the conflict intensifies and aid routes narrow, families in Sudan are running out of options and time. The Al Imdad Foundation is delivering life-saving humanitarian aid to those most at risk. Stand with Sudan. Donate online at alimdad.com or call 0861 786 243 for more information.
Elite Basmati, available throughout the Middle East, and now for the very first time exclusive to South Africa. Brought to you by Murchison Spice, Pietermaritzburg's most famous specialty store. Elite Basmati, available in aromatic white and golden cellar, is packaged in a world-class facility in India and is filled with wholesome goodness for your well-being. Elite Basmati rice by Murchison Spice. For trade inquiries, contact Mohammed on 033 387 2121. Murchison Spice.
Operation Kurbani, Maulana Timur will once again be taking a trip abroad for Kurbani. Many people in the villages live well below the poverty line and only eat meat on the days of Eid al-Adha. Support this cause at 2,170 Rand for 7 shares or 310 Rand per share. Contact Maulana Timur, Maulana Sajjad, Maulana Hamad or Maulana Abbad on 011 852 6324 or 072 299 9268 or 082 368 6866 or 072 697 0131 or 073 576 9786. All slaughtering will be supervised by a team of foreign and local ulama. Visit www.operationkurbani.org.za.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidiri, and we're still unpacking a very, very concerning state of affairs. Moody's, the rating agency, has ultimately flagged the city of Johannesburg for a possible credit downgrade, and this is amid a lot of governance failures that we've been seeing within the city. And Prof, before we went on to that short break, thank you so much for staying with us. I was just find out, how close is Johannesburg to a full-blown out fiscal crisis here? Are we looking at a structural problem or something that can still be corrected within the short term?
Well, I think that it can be corrected, but it's going to take work. The full extent of the deficits in the Joburg Metro are not visible at this point in time because we don't have the latest financials. But if I give you an indication of what happened last year, if we just take City Power as an example, they budgeted 23 billion rand for revenue for City Power, but they only raised 19 billion rand. And in their adjustment budget, they adjusted their revenue, their budgeted revenue from 23 billion rand to 21 billion rand to make the information look closer to what actually happened. So even on their books, that was a shortfall of around about 3 billion rand. Now, in this financial year, City Power didn't budget 23 billion rand, they budgeted around about 26 billion rand for revenue on last year's actual collections of 19 billion rand. Now, nothing appears to have been done to improve their revenue collection since then. And what that means is that they're effectively financing the deficits in City Power from the rest of the metro through sweeping funds, cash, basically, to cover this shortfall. Now, these are, how big that hole is now uncertain, but they weren't even fully revealing it last year. This was on information that was kind of leaked to the press. So 19 billion rand versus an original budget of 23 billion rand of revenue. Now a 26 billion rand budget, which was unrealistic relative to last year's actual collections, shows that they're not being truly honest about their financials. They're trying to disguise the extent of the hole. But this is a serious problem. So first of all, you need to restore governance, transparency to the system. And how this is done will take, I think, new leadership. I'm afraid the problem is trying to fix this with the current leadership. That is what's so difficult. If you allowed this situation to occur, you shouldn't be there. So we do have to put, these are very big budgets, very big complex departments. You need people who can actually run them in charge. And I think we're just seeing failure across the board. We also have a loss of transparency into the public entities themselves, is that we don't really see fully what's going on within them. We see aspects of what's going on at the metro level, but not necessarily in the public entity level. So we've got to see what's going on there and how they're being managed and how they're being held to account. But it looks like it's a very soft touch in dealing with the executives of these various public entities who are basically not able to do their job.
Most definitely. I'm getting questions here from listeners, and I think the most notable one that's coming from a lot of people, and I know you touched on this in the beginning briefly, is residents are saying, people are already struggling with power cuts. They're already struggling with basic service delivery. They're already struggling with water provision from the city of Johannesburg. If ultimately the city is downgraded to junk status, what more will happen to normal residents of the city who are staying here and are trying to survive in the city of gold, so to say?
Well, the downgrade largely only affects the ability to borrow at reasonable interest rates. It doesn't mean they can't borrow, but they also shouldn't be borrowing extensively. So it would make sense for them to borrow for a new investment outlay. But if you compare Johannesburg to the Cape Metro, the Cape Metro is spending billions on infrastructure out of its own revenue. It's not borrowing money to spend that. So its actual budgeted capital outlay, capital expenditure over the next 3 years was about 3 to nearly 4 times what Johannesburg was actually budgeting for. So and it's all entirely internally financed. So that's what we should be doing. We should actually be financing a lot of our expansion from our own revenue base, which, if it were properly collected, would probably allow for that. But in the Western Cape Metro, they're delivering their services. So the issue, and it's quite redistributive in Cape Town, because quite a lot of that capital is being essentially raised from taxing higher income people and businesses, etc. Some of whom are moaning about it. But the point is, it allows them to basically massively expand the capabilities of that city. So in Johannesburg, we're seeing they're not able to do the basic minimum, and there's a downgrading on the capital side. And this is all through internal mismanagement. So firstly, the downgrade itself is just another signal, because everybody already knows what Moody's looking at. It's not like it's a mystery. The issue is we have to correct what's going on internally. And part of our problem, if we had to look at what the holes in the ground that we see, and the failures to actually competently complete work, is all due to the way in which they're procuring these services and the way in which they're paying for them. Contracts are regarded as complete when they're a third done. They pay the money upfront to contractors so that people can walk away and they've taken their money and they can just leave a hole in the road. We don't have explanations for why the work is incomplete, why you dig up a part of a road and never fix it. You dig up a pavement and you never repair it to the state it was in before. There's constant coming back to replace pipes that break because they don't do a proper job. All of that is an indication of the quality of the contractors and the type of contract and the tenders that they're issuing and how they're supervised in the contract management. All of that is problematic. So it really goes to the heart of the organization. That has to change, and the money will flow. In Johannesburg is a rich city, but it won't be rich in the medium to long term if this continues, because it will drive investment away. It will drive the reliable ratepayers away. They will move to the cities that are reliable, that are more able to actually provide services, and where their businesses can actually have a predictable set of utilities that are provided to them. We also have a city where people are now digging boreholes in order to survive the water outages. So the higher income people are basically going off the water grid in a way that is also problematic, because basically it starts to access the underground water without any control, because they're trying to bypass the failures of the city. You don't want that. We can have a very affordable water distribution service in Johannesburg, but because it fails, people try and find alternative solutions. And they also might have implications for the long term in terms of water sustainability from groundwater in Johannesburg over time.
And I think that's also the case with electricity, with all of the solar panels and alternative, sources of energy that people are now starting to, procure for themselves. Let's talk about national implications. Johannesburg, as you mentioned, is a very, very rich city, South Africa's financial hub. If it falters, what are the knock-on effects for the national economy here? Can the rest of South Africa be affected by this?
So there's a number of ways in which there are knock-on effects. One is when you fail to pay bulk supplies properly, you impact on the national services. So Rand Water, Eskom, run up debts against Joburg, the Joburg Metro. And that impacts on their ability to invest and maintain their functionality at the sort of the bulk level. So that is a problem. You've got, in terms of economic growth and development, we might have a redistribution, a refocusing of where people are located, a relocation of industry, etc. It hasn't happened at a large scale yet, but it can happen. You basically deindustrialize Johannesburg, and that can have a knock-on effect. And the problem there is that there are capacity constraints for expansion in, say, the Western Cape. It's not something that can take on all of Joburg's industry. So it's not practical for that to be a solution. We have to retain Johannesburg as a major industrial growth node in South Africa for a diverse economy, not for a mining economy. Johannesburg has moved away from basically being a mining economy to a much more diverse economy going forward. And it was in the past, it was crowding in investment. Joburg was a fantastic place to invest. There was certainty of economic growth if you invested in Johannesburg because of all the different businesses and the richness of the of the industrial base within Johannesburg, it actually generated more economic growth. So now we're basically undermining that, and that because it was so large as part of South Africa's economy, Johannesburg, that will have an impact on our overall economic growth. We will see growth in Cape Town, but that's not enough to compensate for the decline in Johannesburg.
Very, very important to note. There's been a lot of criticism for rating agencies like Moody's, like Fitch here in South Africa in the last couple of years. What do you make of that? The fact that other people are saying, these rating agencies are not reliable. There may be agendas that are being peddled here. Are they reliable, these agencies? Can we take what they give us when it comes to how they rate our countries, especially here in South Africa, the African continent, and also some of the metros?
Well, Fitch and Moody's and Co. all had conflicts of interest in the when we look at the economic crash of sort of 2008, and they failed to downgrade the assets of many US-based banks where they should have, and they knew what was wrong. That kind of conflict of interest undermined their credibility where they were operating in those environments. It doesn't mean that extends to their basic assessment of South Africa, because I don't think that anybody outside of Moody's, I mean, my own assessment would concur with Moody's. It's not really it's not arising from a conflict of interest related to the South African context. But it's quite clear, I would be always wary of rating agencies. The problem here is that people who are resident in Johannesburg know more than Moody's about what's going on here. And it's very deeply problematic and not sustainable going forward. So I would put aside Moody's as being the final say or the final word on the quality of Johannesburg's capability. I think that we ourselves have to make that judgment call. And there are deep problems that need to be resolved. Moody's, I don't think, if that was turned around, Moody's would change their rating. And their impact on Johannesburg is not significant. It's just a nice newsworthy point to make on something that has already been well discussed around Johannesburg's failures going forward. The fact that they haven't produced their financials is a serious concern. We have to basically see what's going on within this, within the Joburg Metro. They are struggling, and we're not getting full transparency. There is clear corruption and conflicts of interest all the way through, and none of that is going to change. So I wouldn't blame that on Moody's. That's basically for citizens of Johannesburg and South Africa to resolve. We can't afford to have this city continue to go into decline.
Most definitely, and I think going to at that, Professor van der Heever from the Wits School of Governance. Thank you so much for helping us make sense of what is clearly a critical moment for the city of Johannesburg and ultimately for South Africa. As you mentioned, there will be knock-on effects if this, I don't know, man, this faltering of Johannesburg economy and just state goes unchecked. Hope we chat again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There we go. And with that, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, it's time for our #FIRA feature with Africa Muslims Agency.